I've presided over thousands of cases, but the morning the police chief's wife stood in front of me accused of assaulting a frail war veteran, the air felt different, heavier. Because in that moment, everyone in the courtroom wondered the same thing. Would justice bend or stand tall? The courtroom was already full when I stepped through the side door and took my seat at the bench. Conversations dropped into uneasy silence, the kind that carries more tension than shouting ever could. Reporters lined the back wall. A few uniformed officers sat together, stiff and expressionless. Regular citizens filled the remaining seats, drawn in by a case that had spread across the city like wildfire. I adjusted my glasses and looked over the file again, even though I already knew it by heart. Defendant, Elaine Mercer, spouse of Police Chief Daniel Mercer. Charge, misdemeanor assault of a 78-year-old military veteran. Even after decades on the bench, some names come with a weight that settles into the room before a single word is spoken. Bring in the defendant, I said. Elaine Mercer walked in with the smooth confidence of someone who had never truly been told no. Her hair was styled perfectly, her posture relaxed. She leaned toward her attorney, whispering something that made him smirk. Not a flicker of concern crossed her face. Then my eyes shifted to the other table. Harold Bennett sat carefully, both hands resting on the handle of his wooden cane. His suit was old but neatly pressed. A small American flag pin rested on his lapel, and a faded Navy cap embroidered with Korean War veterans sat in his lap. His shoulders were slightly hunched, not from shame, but from time. He looked like a man who had worked hard his entire life and never asked for attention. When he tried to adjust his chair, he struggled for a moment. Elaine noticed. She looked, then she looked away. That told me more than any report ever could. I struck the gavel lightly. Court is now in session. The prosecutor stood first, outlining the charge, a confrontation in a grocery store parking lot that escalated into physical contact. The defense called it a misunderstanding. I'd heard that word used to shrink a lot of ugly behavior over the years. While the attorneys spoke, I studied the room the way I always do. Jurors leaned forward, reporters scribbled, officers in the back avoided looking at either party. No one wanted to pick a side too early. But this wasn't about sides, this was about facts. And something deeper, whether power changes how people believe the world should treat them. I looked directly at Elaine. Mrs. Mercer, you are expected to maintain proper courtroom behavior at all times. Do you understand? She gave a quick nod, lips pressed into a thin, impatient line. Yes, Your Honor. Her tone was polite. Her expression was not. Then I turned to Mr. Bennett. Sir, if at any time you need a break, you let me know. We'll accommodate you. He gave a small, grateful nod. Thank you, Judge. His voice was steady, but there was something in it I'd heard before. The sound of a man who'd learned long ago to endure discomfort quietly. As proceedings continued, I couldn't ignore the contrast in front of me. On one side, a woman wrapped in the invisible armor of status. On the other, a man whose strength came from a lifetime of service, not influence. Cases like this test more than the legal system. They test public faith in it, because when someone connected to power stands accused of harming someone vulnerable, people don't just watch for a verdict. They watch for fairness. And fairness doesn't whisper. It must be seen, clearly and without hesitation. The prosecutor finished his opening summary. The defense attorney rose with an easy smile, already framing the incident as overblown, emotions high, no real harm done. I made a note, not about his words, but about his tone. Minimizing harm often says more than denying it. In the gallery I noticed a young man shaking his head quietly. An older woman beside him clasped her hands together like she was in church. This case wasn't just about two people anymore. It had become a mirror the community was staring into. I leaned forward slightly, hands folded. This court will hear the evidence, I said evenly, and we will proceed with respect for the law and for each other. No one here is above accountability. No one here is beneath dignity. For the first time, Elaine's confident expression flickered, just slightly, but I saw it, and so did everyone else. Before this case goes any further, think about this. Should influence ever outweigh character in a courtroom? Tell me where you stand, because what happens next will test that belief in a way no one in this room is ready for. The prosecutor called the first witness, a store security manager with a nervous voice and a tablet in his hands. He explained the camera layout in the parking lot, how every row was covered, how timestamps were automatically logged. Procedure, foundation, facts first, emotion later. I watched the jury as the screen flickered to life. Grainy at first, then clear. A silver SUV rolled aggressively into frame, stopping at an angle behind a slowly reversing sedan. The sedan's brake lights glowed. It paused, cautious. The driver inside, small, gray-haired, turned his head carefully before inching back again. The SUV's horn blasted. Once, twice, 3 times. Even without sound in the courtroom, everyone could feel it. Let it play, I said quietly. The SUV door flew open. Elaine Mercer stepped out, movements sharp and exaggerated. Even on video, her frustration looked theatrical. Arms flailing, jaw tight, she marched toward the sedan before it had fully cleared the space. The sedan stopped. The driver's door opened slowly. Harold Bennett emerged, one hand gripping his cane, the other raised slightly in a gesture that looked like apology. His mouth moved, likely explaining, maybe saying sorry. Elaine stepped closer, too close. She pointed toward the rear of his car, then toward her SUV. Her gestures were fast, cutting through the air. Harold tried to respond, but he moved at the speed of someone whose body no longer obeyed urgency. Then it happened. She slapped the side of his car, hard. Harold flinched. He took a step back, cane wobbling. He raised a hand again, palm open. Not aggressive, defensive. Elaine moved forward. Her hand shoved his shoulder. Not a punch, not a strike, but forceful enough. Harold stumbled sideways. His cane skidded across the pavement. He tried to catch himself on the car door, missed, and fell onto one knee, then fully onto the asphalt. In the courtroom, someone gasped. The video kept rolling. Elaine stood over him for half a second, just long enough for the image to burn into every mind watching. Then she threw her hands up in exasperation and walked back to her SUV. She did not help him up. She did not look back. I felt the air in the courtroom change, heavier, thicker, harder to breathe through. "Pause it there," I instructed. The screen froze on Harold on the ground, one hand pressed to the pavement, the other reaching for a cane just out of reach. I turned my eyes slowly toward the defense table. Elaine shifted in her chair. "That's not the whole story," she muttered, not quite under her breath. Her attorney placed a hand lightly on her arm, a silent warning. I spoke before he could. "Mrs. Mercer, you will remain silent unless your counsel advises you to speak. This is not a conversation. It is a court of law." Her jaw tightened. "Yes, Your Honor." But the frustration in her voice was still there. Not regret, not concern. Annoyance. The prosecutor resumed. "Your Honor, witnesses confirm Mr. Bennett suffered bruising to his hip and shoulder. He required assistance to stand and later sought medical evaluation." I nodded. "Call Mr. Bennett." Harold stood slowly. A bailiff moved to help, but he shook his head gently and managed on his own. Step by careful step, he made his way to the witness stand. He took the oath, voice steady. "Mr. Bennett," the prosecutor began softly, "can you tell the court what you remember about that afternoon?" Harold folded his hands. They were rough, knuckles thick with age and work. "I was just trying to go home," he said. "Takes me a little longer these days. I saw her car, so I stopped. I thought she'd go around." He paused, swallowing. "She started honking. I tried to wave, let her know I was almost done. I didn't want trouble." His eyes stayed forward, not once drifting toward Elaine. "When she came up to me, I said I was sorry for the delay. I told her my leg doesn't move like it used to. Next thing I knew, I was on the ground." Silence filled the space after his words. Not dramatic silence, heavy silence. The kind built from discomfort and truth sitting side by side. The prosecutor nodded gently. "Did you threaten her in any way?" "No, sir." "Raise your voice?" "No, sir." "What did you feel when you were on the ground?" Harold hesitated, then answered honestly. "Embarrassed." That word hit harder than any legal term. "I've fallen before," he added quietly, "but never because someone was angry at me for being slow." Across the room, Elaine exhaled sharply through her nose. I looked at her. "Is there something you'd like to add, Mrs. Mercer?" I asked evenly. Her attorney jumped in. "No, Your Honor." I held her gaze a moment longer before turning back to the witness stand. "Mr. Bennett," I said, "thank you for your service to this country and for your patience here today." He gave a small nod. "Just want things to be fair, Judge. That's all." Fair. Such a simple word, such a difficult standard when pride and power enter the room. I looked out at the gallery. "You've seen the footage," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Ask yourself something. If roles were reversed, would we be calling this a misunderstanding, or would we be calling it what it is?" The courtroom stayed silent, because everyone already knew the answer. Just when the courtroom felt like it had settled into a heavy, inevitable rhythm, the back doors opened. It wasn't loud, no dramatic bang, just the soft click of the handle and the quiet shift of people turning to look. But the ripple it caused moved through the gallery like a gust of wind through still air. Police Chief Daniel Mercer stepped inside. He wasn't in uniform, no badge on display, no command presence, just a dark suit, tie slightly loosened, expression carved from something deeper than stress, regret maybe, resolve. Definitely. Every officer in the back straightened. Elaine's head snapped toward the door. Relief flooded her face so quickly it was almost painful to watch. She sat up straighter, whispering urgently to her attorney. I watched the chief walk down the aisle alone, not to the defense table, to the row behind it. He didn't sit beside his wife. He sat where the public sat. That decision spoke louder than any testimony that day. I folded my hands on the bench. Chief Mercer, this is unusual. Are you here in an official capacity? He stood, voice steady. No, Your Honor, I'm here as a citizen and as a husband. The courtroom stilled. I nodded once. You may remain seated, but understand this court is not a stage for speeches. Yes, Your Honor, but I could see it in his eyes. He hadn't come to protect. He'd come to face something. The prosecutor resumed briefly, but the energy had shifted. Elaine kept glancing back at her husband, expecting reassurance, a nod, something. He didn't give it. Instead, when there was a pause in proceedings, he stood again. Your Honor, may I speak? Her attorney shot up. Objection. I raised a hand. I'll allow a brief statement. Carefully. Chief Mercer stepped forward slightly, though he stayed behind the rail. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. I reviewed the footage myself, he said, frame by frame, not as chief. As a man who believes in the law he swore to uphold. Elaine shook her head. Daniel, don't. He didn't look at her. What I saw, he continued, was not self-defense. It was anger. And that anger hurt someone who deserved respect. A murmur spread through the room. Elaine's face flushed. You don't have to do this. He turned then, finally meeting her eyes. Yes, I do. Silence pressed against the walls. I love you, he said, voice rougher now. But love doesn't mean protecting you from consequences. It means making sure you face them, so you can become better than your worst moment. That landed like a gavel strike. You could feel the shift, not just in Elaine, but in everyone watching. Power had just refused to shield itself. If you've ever wondered what real accountability looks like when it's personal, this was it. Tell me, would you have the courage to do the same? Elaine blinked rapidly, tears forming but pride still fighting to hold ground. I was stressed. He was blocking traffic. I didn't mean to. You meant to shove him, her husband said quietly. Intent follows action. Her shoulders sagged a fraction. I let the moment breathe before speaking. This courtroom, I said, does not operate on influence. It operates on responsibility, and responsibility weighs more when others are watching your example. I looked toward the gallery, then back at Elaine. You are married to the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in this city. That does not grant you privilege. It demands higher restraint. She looked down at the table. I continued, voice steady but firm. Mr. Bennett wore his nation's uniform long before any of us held our current roles. Respect for elders and veterans is not optional in a civilized society. It is foundational. Harold lowered his gaze, humbled by words he never asked for. You didn't just knock down a man, I said. You knocked down the standard you were expected to uphold. Tears slipped down Elaine's cheeks now. Real ones. Not dramatic. Not defensive. Something cracking open. In the gallery, someone whispered, "About time." Chief Mercer remained standing, hands clasped in front of him, like a man awaiting his own verdict. This is bigger than a parking lot, I went on. When people believe connections erase consequences, trust in justice erodes, and when trust erodes, communities fracture. I leaned forward slightly, but when those with power accept accountability, trust begins to rebuild. I saw officers in the back exchange looks, subtle nods. They understood what was happening. This wasn't an attack on law enforcement. It was a defense of integrity. Elaine wiped her face. I didn't think, she said weakly. No, I replied. You didn't. And sometimes that's exactly the problem. If you believe thoughtlessness is still responsibility, you already understand where this is going. Stay with me. I turned to Harold. Sir, is there anything you'd like to say before I move toward sentencing considerations? He hesitated, then spoke softly. I don't want her ruined, Judge. I just didn't want to feel invisible. That sentence settled into the room like truth rarely does, quietly, but permanently. I nodded. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Then I looked at Elaine one more time. Today is not about humiliation, I said. It's about recognition, of harm, of privilege, of the chance to choose who you are after your worst decision. Her composure was gone now. In its place was something raw, understanding, and fear, because deep down she knew what was coming next wouldn't be erased with an apology, whispered behind closed doors. Justice was about to become visible, and visible justice changes people. When I began to speak again, the courtroom felt smaller, not physically but emotionally, like everyone inside shared the same breath. Sentencing is not about revenge, I said. It is about correction, accountability, and restoration where possible. Elaine stood, hands trembling now. Her attorney placed a hand on her back, but she barely seemed to notice. Mrs. Mercer, you used force against a man nearly 4 decades older than you, a veteran, a citizen who posed no threat. The law requires consequences. She nodded faintly. But this court also recognizes potential for growth, I continued, and growth only comes when comfort is removed and responsibility is embraced. I let the pause stretch just long enough for the words to settle. You are hereby sentenced to 60 days in jail, suspended on the condition of full compliance with probation terms. Her breath caught. You will serve 1 year of supervised probation. She swallowed hard. You will complete 500 hours of community service at a veterans rehabilitation center. Her head snapped up slightly, not in protest, but realization. You will attend mandatory anger management counseling and provide documented proof of completion. Tears flowed freely now. You will issue a formal public apology to Mr. Bennett, not written by attorneys but spoken by you, and you will participate in 3 community forums addressing respect for elders, accountability, and the consequences of unchecked anger. The courtroom was silent except for quiet sniffles. This sentence is not designed to break you, I said. It is designed to rebuild you into someone who understands the weight of their actions. Elaine turned slowly toward Harold. I'm sorry, she said, voice shaking. I was wrong, completely wrong. Harold looked at her for a long moment. I accept the apology, he said gently. Just remember how it felt to be on the ground. She nodded, shoulders shaking. Chief Mercer closed his eyes briefly, emotion crossing his face. Not relief, but gratitude for truth. If you think justice should teach, not just punish, this is that moment. Let me know if you agree. I looked at the chief. Your presence here today matters. Accountability inside families strengthens accountability in communities. He nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I gave a final glance around the courtroom. No one is above the law, I said, but no one is beyond redemption when they face it honestly. I lifted the gavel. This court is adjourned. The sound echoed, not harsh but final. Elaine didn't rush out. She stood still, absorbing the weight of a consequence that couldn't be avoided, bought, or hidden. And for the first time since she walked in, she looked smaller, not diminished, but humbled. Sometimes that's where real change begins. 1 year later, the courtroom looked exactly the same. Polished wood, flags standing still, the quiet dignity of a place where lives often change in a single afternoon. But the woman standing in front of me was not the same person who had once stood there with crossed arms and a dismissive stare. Elaine Mercer's posture had softened, not weakened, steadied. Her clothes were simple, her expression unguarded. She held a folder against her chest, not like a shield, but like something earned. I glanced at the review file in front of me. Compliance hearing, completion of probation terms. But paperwork only tells you what someone did. Presence tells you who they became. Before we continue, think about this. Do you believe people can truly change after facing consequences? Or do you think some mistakes define a person forever? Mrs. Mercer, I said, step forward. She did, meeting my eyes without hesitation. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice no longer carried impatience. It carried weight. The kind earned by long days and uncomfortable reflection. The prosecutor confirmed completion of all required conditions. 500 hours at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, counseling sessions documented, public apology delivered, 3 community forums completed. But numbers don't show transformation. Mr. Bennett is present today, I said. Elaine turned. Harold Bennett walked in slowly, cane in hand, but with a steadier rhythm than before. He wore the same veteran's cap. This time, though, when people noticed him, they didn't just see an old man. They saw someone who had been wronged and respected enough to be remembered. He took a seat in the front row. I addressed him gently. Sir, you've remained involved in this process over the past year. Would you care to share your observations? He nodded, standing carefully. I didn't think I'd see her again after that day, he began. Figured lawyers and paperwork would take over. A small ripple of knowing laughter moved through the gallery. But she showed up. First week at the center, she looked terrified. Didn't know how to talk to anyone. Elaine smiled faintly through nervous tears. She helped with meal trays at first, quiet. Didn't tell anyone who she was married to. Didn't act important. He paused. Then one day, one of the guys, Vietnam vet, tough as nails, dropped his cup. Couldn't bend down. She knelt right there on the floor, picked it up, and asked if he needed anything else. The room was still. That's when I figured maybe she was learning something. Elaine wiped her eyes. If you've ever seen someone earn back respect instead of demanding it, you know how powerful that is. Would you have given her that chance? Harold continued. She listened to stories, real ones, about war, about coming home, about feeling forgotten. She didn't interrupt, didn't check her phone, just listened. Listening, such a simple act, such a rare one. She even started organizing rides for vets who couldn't get to appointments, he added. Didn't have to, just did. I looked at Elaine. Why? She took a breath. Because for the first time I understood what it feels like to be ignored, and how much it hurts when someone treats you like you don't matter. Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. In counseling, I had to confront how quickly I go to anger when I feel inconvenienced. I used to think being busy made my time more valuable than other people's. She swallowed. It doesn't. The honesty in that statement filled the room more than any legal argument ever could. Chief Mercer sat behind her again, just like before, but this time there was no tension in his posture, only quiet pride, not in avoiding consequences, but in facing them. Elaine continued, speaking at those community forums was harder than court, standing in front of strangers and saying I hurt someone because I thought my frustration mattered more than his dignity. That stays with you. She looked toward Harold. You gave me more grace than I deserved. Harold shook his head gently. Grace isn't about deserving, it's about choosing not to carry anger forever. That line settled deep. I leaned back slightly, hands folded. This court often sees people at their worst, I said. We rarely get to see what happens after. Today, we do. Outside this courtroom, stories usually end at sentencing. But real justice doesn't end there. It begins there. I turned to Elaine. What have you learned about respect? That it isn't automatic, she said. It's shown, especially to people who can't demand it. And accountability? That love without accountability isn't love. It's permission to stay broken. Her husband closed his eyes briefly, emotion visible. If you believe holding someone accountable can actually be an act of love, you're watching proof of it right now. I nodded. Mr. Bennett, do you feel the sentence served its purpose? He smiled. Judge, I didn't want her punished. I wanted her to understand. She does. Silence followed. Not empty, but full. I reviewed the final report, then set it aside. Mrs. Mercer, this court finds that you have fulfilled the conditions of your sentence. More importantly, you have demonstrated sincere effort toward personal change. Her shoulders trembled. Probation is hereby terminated successfully. She covered her mouth, tears falling freely. But understand this, I continued gently. Redemption is not a destination. It's a practice. Keep showing up. Keep listening. Keep choosing patience over pride. Yes, Your Honor, she whispered. I looked toward the gallery. Justice is strongest when it holds people accountable without stripping away their humanity, and mercy is meaningful only when it follows responsibility. Reporters scribbled, but the room remained quiet. Power did not shield wrongdoing here, I said. It stood beside accountability. That example will echo further than any punishment ever could. Chief Mercer nodded once, eyes shining. I lifted the gavel, then paused. Before I close this chapter, consider something. How different would our communities look if more people chose humility after mistakes instead of denial? This matter is concluded, I said, bringing the gavel down softly, but no one rushed to leave. Elaine turned to Harold. Would it be all right if I kept volunteering? He chuckled. Only if you stop calling it volunteering. You're part of the crew now. She laughed through tears. They shook hands, not as victim and offender, but as two people who had walked through something hard and come out with understanding. As the courtroom emptied, I remained seated a moment longer, reflecting. I've seen wealth try to buy freedom. I've seen influence try to rewrite facts. But every so often, I see something better. Someone choosing to grow when it would be easier to hide. That's when justice does more than punish. It heals. If this story reminded you that consequences can build character instead of just destroying it, share it with someone who needs to hear that. If you believe elders and veterans deserve unwavering respect, make that known. And if you believe real justice includes the chance to become better, carry that belief into your own life. Because courts can guide accountability, but communities sustain redemption.